Welcome, everyone. In this explainer, we are going to dive into something truly monumental. We hear all the time about major historical migrations, right? But what actually happens the day after the journey ends? Today, we're going to figure out how an entirely new society, a completely new ummah, and a civilization based strictly on justice was built literally from the ground up after the Hijrah to Medina. It is an absolute masterclass in societal organization. So here is the architectural blueprint of this revolutionary new civilization. We'll start with a new society, explore the Brotherhood, look at the multi-purpose Masjid, an-Nabawi, unpack the historic Constitution, and finally discuss the impending clash.
All right, Section 1, a new society, beyond the Hijrats.
So, the physical journey of the Hijrah, that was finally over. But actually, the really rigorous work was literally just beginning. They weren't just in survival mode anymore. Now, they were tasked with transitioning from a displaced, migrating group into a fully structured civilization. The foundation for an entirely new way of life had to be laid out right then and there.
Moving on to Section 2, the Brotherhood, forging bonds between Muhajirs and Ansars.
Okay, let's stop and look at the profound contrast here because it's absolutely crucial to understand. On one side, you have the Muhajirs, the immigrants from Mecca. These people left behind their homes, their businesses, literally all of their wealth. They arrived with absolutely nothing. And on the other side, the Ansars of Medina, who welcomed them with open arms, fully ready to share their entire lives. But think about it. This massive influx of refugees, that's a huge sociological crisis that needed a solution fast.
And here is where Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, implemented this absolute genius of a sociological solution, the historic Pact of Brotherhood. One Ansar was paired up to become the literal brother of one Muhajir. And we're not talking about temporary charity here, or just crashing on a couch for a few weeks. The Ansars shared their homes and shelter. They divided their wealth and their businesses. Even their daily food was split equally. It was this unprecedented, institutionalized integration that permanently unified the society. I mean, it provided a level of cohesion you very rarely see in history.
Next up, Section 3, Masjid, an-Nabawi, the new center of society. So now that the people were united, they desperately needed a hub. And we need to shatter a really common misconception right here. Masjid an-Nabawi was not just a place for prayer. Yes, for sure, it was the spiritual center. But look at the whole shebang. It was an educational hub for crucial teaching and learning. It functioned as a judicial court where justice was delivered. It was a welfare center, actively helping the poor and destitute. And crucially, it was the administrative headquarters managing the entire society. It was, quite literally, the absolute beating heart of this new civilization. And as this massive center started functioning, they obviously needed a way to call everyone together. The story of how this happened is just incredible. A companion of the Prophet had this beautiful dream outlining the exact method for the call to prayer, and the immense honor of delivering that very first Adhan went to Bilal ibn Rabah. Just picture the sensory details for a second. Imagine his powerful voice echoing through the air of Medina for the very first time. Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. As those words echoed out, people literally had tears of absolute joy in their eyes. It marked this incredible new era of freedom and identity.
Which brings us to Section 4, the historic Constitution, drafting the first social contract.
But here's the thing, identity and a central hub aren't quite enough to govern a whole city, right? Medina was super diverse. You had Muslims, Jewish communities, and various other tribes all living together. So to unify them, they drafted a written agreement known as the Constitution of Medina. Let's look at the breakdown. For Muslims, it established security and justice. For the Jewish community, it completely guaranteed religious freedom. And for the other tribes, it promised equal protection under the law. To put that into perspective, this stands as one of the earliest written social contracts in human history. It laid down a total game-changing framework for human rights, pluralism, and mutual defense.
Finally, Section 5, the impending clash, a storm brewing in Mecca.
Now, as you probably know, with any major shift in power, stability brings its own risks. Because of this amazing brotherhood, the centralized organization at the Masjid, and that robust constitution, the dynamic had fundamentally changed. The Muslims were no longer just some small, marginalized group struggling to get by. They had transformed into a highly powerful, thoroughly organized society. So, ask yourself, how do you think the Quraysh back in Mecca reacted to this? They had driven the Muslims out, probably expecting them to just scatter and fade away into the desert. But instead, they're watching this massive structural growth with intense anger and a rapidly growing fear of Islam's rising power.
And guys, the tension just reached a total boiling point. Consider the daunting odds of this inevitable collision. You have a newly built society fielding a small force of exactly 313 Muslims, and they are standing against a massive, highly organized army of 1,000 armed Quraysh marching straight from Mecca. I mean, that numerical disadvantage is just staggering.
This massive clash sets the stage for the Battle of Badr, the very first major military conflict for the newly established Medina state. It was a moment of absolute reliance on divine help, resulting in a victory that would quite literally change the course of history forever. But it leaves us with one fascinating question. How on earth does a brand new society of just 313 individuals survive a direct encounter with an organized army of 1,000? Well, that is exactly what we're going to uncover next time. Thank you so much for exploring the foundations of the Medina state with me today. Keep seeking knowledge, and I'll catch you in the next Explain.